And now, aviation weather around Alaska.
Hello, I'm meteorologist David Kramer with Alaska Weather. Thanks for joining for our aviation segment today. Starting off, we'll take a look at our flying weather on Saturday morning. We have IFR conditions along the southwest coastline going up towards the Seward Peninsula, and also on the Pacific side of the Alaska Peninsula and eastern Aleutian Islands, extending out by Kodiak. We also have some IFR up by the Beaufort Sea. Down through the eastern portions of mainland Alaska, primarily VFR, that's going to extend into the Panhandle as well. Now, as we move into Saturday afternoon, we have a big storm coming up from the south. That's going to be the remnants of what used to be Typhoon Halong, and that's going to bring in quite a bit of IFR conditions throughout the Bering Sea, Aleutian Islands, out by the Alaska Peninsula. It's also going to bring a lot of strong winds with it that we'll talk about a little bit later. Along the west coast, we have widespread IFR conditions up through the Seward Peninsula area, down through the Bristol Bay area. We also have IFR out by the southern portions of Kodiak Island, and some MVFR extending into much of south central Alaska. Some MVFR conditions also up along the Arctic coastline, but VFR conditions down the eastern portion of the mainland down into the Panhandle on Saturday afternoon. As we move into Sunday morning, continuing to see VFR conditions out over the Panhandle area, but IFR conditions from the front associated with that strong low moving in through the Bering are going to bring IFR conditions through the Prince William Sound area, eastern Kenai Peninsula, down through Kodiak, up through much of the west coast, all the way through the Kotzebue Sound area with MVFR conditions farther to the north. Behind the frontal system, we'll have some VFR conditions coming in for the Aleutian Islands. Then on Sunday afternoon, VFR conditions for most of the Aleutian Islands and Alaska Peninsula, but IFR conditions up by the Norton Sound area through much of the rest of the northwestern coastline. Some IFR conditions extending out through the Brooks Range with MVFR conditions to the north. In the interior, primarily MVFR conditions, some isolated areas of IFR as well. And then in the Gulf waters, especially as we get farther to the west and north, we're going to see some IFR conditions there. And finally, going to see some MVFR conditions coming into the northern portions of the Panhandle. For our passes starting up north on Anaktuvuk Pass, it's going to be VFR throughout the day on Saturday. Adigan Pass also expected to be VFR. As our front comes into the southern portions of the mainland, we are going to see some transitions for a lot of our passes, MVFR to IFR for Lake Clark and Merrill as we get into the afternoon hours. Rainy Pass also start off MVFR, drop all the way down to IFR in the afternoon. Windy Pass starting off VFR, dropping down to MVFR. Isabel should stay VFR throughout the day Saturday, as well as at Mentasta. And then Tanita will start off VFR, dropping down to marginal conditions in the afternoon. Portage also starting off VFR, dropping down to marginal in the afternoon. And then Chilkoot and White should both be VFR throughout the day on Saturday. So look at our freezing levels. We have some warmer air coming in from the south as that storm from the south comes up, brings some warm air and rain with it, headed towards the southern portions of the state with 8,000 feet for freezing levels getting into the Bristol Bay area. As we look at our icing, we'll have some icing expected above 8,000 feet out over the northern portions of the Gulf of Alaska, extending up to the north and west towards the Seward Peninsula, above 3,000 feet there. As we look out over the Alaska Peninsula, above 10,000 feet, and then above 3,000 feet, and some colder air out on the west side of our low pressure system coming into the Bering Sea. As you look at our jet streak, we'll see some stronger winds moving in towards the Aleutian Islands out of a southwesterly direction, 160 knots approaching the central Aleutian Islands, dropping down to 130 knots as we get up towards St. Matthew Island. And then we'll still have some stronger winds out over mainland Alaska, 95 knots out of the west by Kotzebue, 130 knots in the eastern portions of the Gulf out of a northwesterly direction. Dropping down to 9,000 feet, going to have some strong winds here as well. Only around 30 knots for the Panhandle area out of a northwesterly direction, but as expected with our strong storm coming up, we're going to have some strong winds as well. Southwesterly winds at 90 knots as we get by the eastern Aleutian Islands into the Alaska Peninsula area, dropping down to 55 knots as we get closer towards Kodiak, 45 knots for the YK Delta area, 35 knots up by the Seward Peninsula area, all out of a southwesterly direction. Down to 3,000 feet, still strong winds circulating around our low pressure system, 85 knots out of the southwest by the eastern Aleutian Islands through the western portions of the Alaska Peninsula. Stronger winds making it closer towards Kodiak as well, 50 knots just to the south of Kodiak Island out of a westerly direction. Up by the Kotzebue Sound area, southerly winds around 40 knots expected there. Eastern portions of the mainland should be fairly light, as well as at the Panhandle, some southern portions can see winds up to around 20 knots out of a northwesterly direction. This is going to bring some areas of turbulence below 4,000 feet for the southern portions of the Panhandle, but our main areas of turbulence are going to be along the Aleutian Islands, below 4,000 feet by the eastern Aleutians, below 3,000 feet by the western Aleutian Islands. We do expect some areas of isolated severe turbulence for the eastern Aleutian Islands through the Alaska Peninsula about to the Cold Bay area, again below 4,000 feet there. Very dangerous flying conditions. And as we get by the Bristol Bay area, below 4,000 feet for that moderate turbulence, extending up through the Kotzebue Sound area, below 3,000 feet expected there. With Alaska Weather, I'm David Kramer. Thanks for watching.